Hello, T-Cats, and welcome to episode 25 of the True Crime All the Time podcast. I'm your host, Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, what is going on tonight?
Hey, man, what's up?
Not much, man. I'm ready to go.
I'm just excited to be in the studio tonight. We got some good cases to talk about on our main podcast here, and then our unsolved one later tonight that we're going to do.
Yeah, definitely this one. We're doing Israel Keys. I mean, the guy is just diabolical.
Yes.
I mean, that's the word I would use. Okay, so before we get into him, we got to give some love to our Patreon supporters. We actually had a bunch this week, so I got to run through them. We got Laura, Juliet Howe, Renee Williams, Michelle Watson, Anita Mitchell, Leslie Kidd, Janice Leiberts, Rebecca Manners, and Jack Ardone. Now, I guarantee one of those I mispronounced, and if I did, I apologize. But thank you so much for supporting us.
Absolutely, thank you.
And thanks to all of you that continue to support us. It really makes a big difference in our ability to keep the show going. So thank you. Anybody that wants to support us can do that by going to patreon.com/truecrimealltime. Definitely check out our website. Look for our contact information. Gibby and I posted some senior pictures of ourselves on Twitter. We're kind of having a lot of fun with some of the other true crime podcasts. So if you don't currently follow us on Twitter at TCALL the time, so TC all the time. That much better way to say that.
Yeah.
Than the first one I did.
Trying to figure where you're headed with that.
I'm sure you can go back and find it. We had a lot of fun with, Already Gone, In Sight. Who else? I think the captain was even on there from True Crime Garage. He didn't post a picture, but he was part of the conversation.
Twisted.
Deanna from Twisted Philly. There was a lot of good podcasts.
Yeah, Canadian. All that.
Canadian True Crime.
Yeah.
Cambo from True Crime Island. A lot of good ones. And these are great people, and we love interacting with them as well because we know how hard they're working, to put out some really good content. But we had a lot of fun. They posted pictures of themselves back in the day, and we did as well, and everybody had a lot of fun with it. In 2016, California wife and mother Sherry Papini disappeared for 22 days. When she was found, she told authorities a detailed account of being kidnapped and tortured. Years later, in a stunning twist, Papini pled guilty to making false statements about what happened to her, setting off a media firestorm. Now, for the first time, Sherry Papini is telling her side of the story and revealing shocking new information. Sherry Papini, Caught in a Lie, an ID documentary event, Monday, May 26th at 9 on ID. Set your DVR. Don't forget to check out the merchandise tab on our website. Right now, we're offering a 10% discount code. You can find that on Twitter and on our Facebook page as well. And last but not least, after you listen to this, don't forget to jump over and check out True Crime All the Time Unsolved. Right now, an episode is dropping on the Honolulu Strangler. Last week's episode on Jennings 8 was very well received, Gibbs.
Yeah, it was a good
one. We got a lot of really positive feedback, as well as on the Wichita Massacre.
Yeah, that was a good episode.
And
too.
Reginald and Jonathan Carr. So we appreciate all that feedback. So let's get into Israel Keys. And there are some people, he's probably not as well known as a lot of serial killers that we will talk about, on this show, but he should be up there.
Yeah, he should be.
Because he's got a body count that could be very high, much higher than what he's admitted to. Not only was he a serial killer, but he was also a serial burglar, a serial bank robber,
a
serial dumper. No. Yeah, I guess you could have maybe call him a serial dumper as well. He committed burglaries and bank robberies all across the country. And it was said that he basically just did that so that he could fund his habit of killing people. I mean, this is the kind of individual that we're talking about, and we're going to get into it, but this guy enjoyed killing people. There's no other way to say it.
Yeah. I mean, he really wasn't even a hobby, was it? I mean, I wouldn't call it a hobby. This was his mission.
Why? I don't know. Maybe a hobby. I think he enjoyed it like some people really enjoy playing golf.
Yeah. Wow.
Which is scary to think about when you're thinking about taking another human's life. To think that, he was robbing people's houses and robbing banks just to make sure he had enough money to carry out these elaborate plans. And that's, obviously we'll get into that when we get into the meat of the story, but
one warped mind.
Yeah, no doubt. Because he traveled all throughout the United States and even into Canada, Mexico, maybe even into some other countries. So that's why I say, his body count could be much, much higher than what he was willing to take credit for. And the other thing I would say is that it seemed like everywhere that this guy went, people ended up dead, wherever he traveled. We'll never know the true number, and there's no way anybody will ever know, but I have a feeling it's a lot higher than the facts that we have to support.
Sure.
So let's talk about time frame a little bit, because all of this murder and I mean kidnappings, burglaries, and arson, you name it, he did it. All of this occurred roughly between 2001 to 2012.
Yeah, so 10, 11 years.
Yeah, so he operated for quite a long time. Mm-hmm. And that's another reason why there's a lot of people that think his number is much, much higher.
I would say that Israel Keyes is probably the most criminally sophisticated serial killer in recent times. And he was a very brilliant guy, very tactically oriented guy. And he made a lot of decisions. We don't know how many people he killed. We believe it's at least 36 based on his travel records and things like that, but it could be more. He admitted to 11 of them when he was captured. But the reason why he was so good was that he actually set up operation in Alaska because he knew that it's the least populated state. He knew that the least number of cops would be there, and they wouldn't be looking for a serial killer up there. And so what he would do is he set up operations there, but he never hunted around home. He always flew somewhere, rented a car, and then drove hundreds, if not 1,000 miles he would rob a bank so he'd have money, and he would buy guns, he would buy he'd have a kill kit, and he would bury it and memorize the location of it, and then leave it there and go to another town and do a kill. Mm-hmm. And then go back to Alaska or go on a cruise or do something while everything calmed down, and then he would plan his next kill. And the thing about him was he was absolutely random. I mean, he was a very enigmatic killer because his victims were a random pool. It could be a guy this time, it could be a woman that time, it could be a couple that time. And it was all about building a web and then seeing who fell into it.
That was an interview that Jim Clemente did. And a lot of people will know Jim Clemente. He's a podcaster in his own right, but he's a famous FBI profiler. And to me, if Jim Clemente says that you are, one of the smartest serial killers in recent memory, I mean, that is really saying something, because Jim has seen it all.
Well, I think, it's kind of interesting how he points out how good this guy is because he's making it very hard for the police to ever track him because it's so random locations, random victims.
And we've talked about that before, right? To me, that's very scary.
Yeah.
The randomness of it. And again, we're going to get into all these details, but the elaborate plans that he went through to cover his tracks and, go out of his way to not get caught. It really took a lot of planning. I mean, this was not a dumb person.
No.
He was very intelligent.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely, like you said, he laid it out, figured it all out in advance. Clearly, he'd go in, rob a bank, get his money, get his kit together, do what he had to do, and get out. we'll really find out how intelligent this guy was.
Yeah, I agree with you. So, as we always do, let's talk a little bit about Israel Keyes' early life. He was born January 7th, 1978. He was born in Richmond, Utah, and he was born to Mormon parents. Now, Israel was the second of 10 children, so big family. They were all homeschooled. So he had sisters named Sunshine, Charity, which you do hear that, Hosanna, that's not a name you hear a lot, and Autumn Rose. Now, as a kid, Israel had some emotional issues. A lot of this stuff that we're going to talk about comes out way after the fact, and it comes out from Israel himself. But, he admitted to having emotional issues. He admitted to torturing cats as a kid. Again, you and I have talked about that on a lot of different episodes. Now, eventually, the family would move to Stevens County, Washington, just north of a city called Colville. And it's here that they start attending this, what was called a Christian Identity Church. And it was known as the Ark. It sounds all well and good, but it was also said that this church was known for very racist and very anti-Semitic views. Not all well and good.
No.
Right, Gibbs?
Right. No, not good.
Now, it was during this time that Israel and his family, they were neighbors with another family by the name of the Kehoes. Chevy and Shane Kehoe were brothers. They were like unbelievable racists and would later, and we could do a whole episode on these guys because they would later be convicted of, murders, attempted murder. So the Kehoes were also members of this church, the Ark. Basically what it preached was white supremacy. Kehoes were part of or would become part of the Aryan Brotherhood or Aryan Nation or whatever you call it. It was in 1996 that Chevy Kehoe would end up killing an Arkansas gun dealer, his wife, and their small daughter. And it was said that this was all in an attempt to help cover up Timothy McVeigh's role in the Oklahoma City bombing. And again, Gibbs, we could do a whole episode on this, all of this interconnectivity between the Oklahoma City bombing, Ruby Ridge, Waco, all of this kind of, was connected back at that time. But the Kehoes were kind of part of this whole movement. And what's very interesting about it, I think for me and you, is that in 97, because, they're on the run, right, for killing this guy in Arkansas. They get down here in Wilmington, Ohio, which is, 45 minutes from us. Not that far. And this was big news. I remember this, very clearly 20 years ago. They get involved with this massive shootout with an Ohio State highway patrolman. And I think there were some deputy sheriffs involved from Wilmington. And this was back when, I think probably the start of when you started to see like the trooper dash cams. I don't know when the first one came out, but this was 20 years ago. But it was all caught on the trooper dash cam. And I remember it vividly. The firefight that ensued.
I remember being played again and again on a lot of different TV stations.
Oh, yeah, it was played all over. But what are the odds, right? So you have Israel Keyes that's going to grow up to be a fairly prolific serial killer as a youngster, being friends with Chevy and Shane Kehoe that are going to go on to be murderers themselves. What are the odds?
Well, I say it all the time. It's interesting to me every time we research suspect, right, or known, known killers, how many other killers are in that same area, or the tie-ins that we have with so many different serial killers or just just mass killers.
And I think you and I have talked about the number that are operating in the same area at the same time.
Right.
But I don't think they're going out and playing golf together
Yeah, I don't think there's a
or eating dinner.
secret club.
No, this one here really kind of sparked my interest because they were actually friends. And I just thought that was, I mean, I don't know. I guess my thinking was, what are the odds of that? So Keyes grows up in a very religious household, right? Homeschooled. They're going to this church that, although it's religious, it's got sounds like it had some pretty crazy ideas. Ultimately, he would reject religion altogether and end up identifying as an atheist. So Israel Keyes and his family, they leave Colville in the late 90s and they relocate to an Amish community in Maine. So we fast forward to July of 1998, and this is when Keyes joins the Army. He had just bought a real small house. He's living in Constable, New York, and he decides to join the Army, and he's inducted in New Jersey. He ends up training down at Fort Hood, Texas, and then he ends up stationed at Fort Lewis. Now, while he's in the Army, he does a tour in Egypt. It's said that, he serves very honorably while he's in the military, to the point where he received a lot of different awards. I think he got an Army Achievement Medal, Army Service Ribbon, Marksman Badge, Expert Infantry Badge, Air Assault Badge. I mean, he was an Army guy.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
And he got an honorable discharge in 2001.
Another serial killer that was served in the armed forces.
Yeah, and you and I have talked about this both on the podcast and off the podcast, really. We would never bash the military. I mean, it's the last thing we would ever do. But what a coincidence that, how many of these serial killers have we profiled that have served in the military?
Yeah.
It just is, it's very strange.
To me, it's just intriguing. Just another one of those facts that you put back in the back of your head and recall every time.
Yeah, and again, can't say it enough. We love the military, and we're not trying to put anybody down at all. It's
nothing but respect.
It's just an intriguing coincidence.
Well, for sure, he got some excellent training.
Well, I think there's no doubt that that's one thing you're going to get in the military, right? You're going to get some excellent training on a variety of different things.
Yeah, strong discipline.
And I think one of the things that he's going to show is a lot of discipline, a lot of planning, and maybe he did learn some of that in the military. Now, we have to talk about his first crime, because it actually happens right before he joins the military. Doesn't come out till later, but he talks about raping a young girl in Oregon, and he's a little fuzzy on these details, but sometime 1996 to 1998, he just knows it was before he went into the military. And he would have been, what, Gibbs, 18, 19 years old probably.
Yeah, somewhere around that.
Probably a teenager at this point. What he says is that he abducted a female while she and her friends were tubing down the river. And somehow he was able to separate this girl from the rest of her friends, and he sexually assaulted her. Now, he let her go and sent her back down the river on her tube. So he didn't kill her. Now, he would say, and again, he's very fuzzy on some of these details, but he would say that the victim was somewhere between 14 to 18 years old. That's a pretty big span.
That is.
So Keyes was living in Maupin, Oregon at this time, and the abduction was thought to have been near that location, but it was never reported to law enforcement. They could never find any, because granted, they're going way back in time, right? This is something that he's going to be telling them way down the pike. So it's another one of those cases where we kind of have to flip back and forth in time because he's relaying details after he's caught. Now, one thing that he did tell investigators that I think was very telling is he told them that he planned on killing this girl. This was going to be his very first kill. But for whatever reason, at the last minute, he decided not to.
Lucky her.
Yeah, very lucky girl. Now, she was sexually assaulted, so
Unlucky.
unlucky in that regard.
But you know what I mean. She's still alive.
You're right. Lucky to have her life. And that's one of the things that you and I have talked about too, right? As we go through these cases, how many people had, somebody looking over their shoulder or somebody looking down on them, or it was just pure luck or pure happenstance or whatever it was, but they could have just as easily been a victim. And for whatever reason, fate, luck, whatever you want to call it, divine intervention, they weren't. What happens when they find out 10, 15 years later that what they thought was maybe a one-off situation where they were sexually assaulted, but what happens when that person puts two and two together and realizes that it was not a random sexual assault? This was the first act of a serial killer that would go on to...
And they could have moved away, and now they're listening to this podcast. They're like, you know what? I remember that happened to me.
Oh, man, you just gave me chills. What if that really happened? That's freaky.
First, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we apologize.
Yeah.
We got to talk about Keyes' MO a little bit, right? We've kind of hinted at it, that he was very meticulous. He went to great lengths.
Every serial killer, including, I believe, Mr. Keyes, are not crazy. You cannot be that organized and deliberate and fit any legal definition of insanity. There is nothing probably greater than holding the power and control of someone's life and looking him in the eye and being able to control all of that is intoxicating to serial killers. And that's why they keep doing it. It's very common for serial killers to have no relationship with the individuals they ultimately kill. Many times they will not do it in their own community. Mr. Keyes, Ted Bundy fits this profile.
Oh, and he talked about Ted Bundy.
TB.
And we're gonna talk about Ted Bundy a little bit because Israel Keyes had a fascination with Ted Bundy. They shared some similarities. Like Bundy, Keyes they were both very methodical. And like it was said in the clip, there was some feeling of possession over the victims for both of these guys. And Keyes went as far as studying Ted Bundy, and I think he was emulating him, and he was taking some of his cues from some of the things that he learned about Ted Bundy in his research and his readings. So Israel Keyes, he planned these murders way in advance. And like we said, he took a lot of precautions against being caught. But he was unlike a lot of serial killers in that he had no victim profile, right? I think Jim Clemente might have said it early on in that first clip. It could be a man, it could be a woman, hair color. Now see, that's where he differed from Bundy. Bundy had a type. Bundy liked women. He liked women with a certain hairstyle. I believe it was like parted down the middle or something like that. That was Bundy's kind of, he had a type. To me, that's what makes it scary, because Keyes was so random. It could have been anybody that he saw or came in contact with.
Well, if this is a sport, which this was a sport for him, and you didn't want to get caught. I mean, he basically, I don't know how you could do it any better than how he performed it.
Well, and you and I have talked about this before. I don't think we're giving any tips to anybody.
Mm-mm.
The easiest way to get away with something like this is, number one, make sure you have no connection to the person. And we're going to see, I mean, he goes way farther than that. In some of these instances, in some of these cases, he would rent a car and drive up to 1,000 miles. So he'd fly into a city, rent a car in, let's say, Detroit. I'm just making it up.
Right.
Drive 1,000 miles to where he ultimately wanted to go, commit the murder there, drive somewhere else and fly out.
Smart.
Yeah. I mean, he really had thought about all of this stuff way, way in advance. True Crime All the Time is sponsored by BetterHelp. You know, folks, therapy can feel like a big investment, but let's think about the state of your mind. It's just as important as your physical health. Traditional in-person therapy can cost anywhere from $100 to $250 per session, which adds up really fast. But with BetterHelp Online Therapy, you can save, on average, up to 50% per session. With BetterHelp, you pay a flat fee for weekly sessions, saving you big on cost and time. And you get quality care at a price that makes sense and can help you with anything from anxiety to everyday stress. Your mental health is worth it, and now it's within reach. I've used the BetterHelp service for years. And I love the fact that, I can connect with a therapist in a comfortable spot in my home on my laptop. With over 30,000 therapists, BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform, having served over 5 million people globally. Your well-being is worth it. Visit BetterHelp.com/TCAT today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/TCATT. Even the smallest step forward can make a big difference in your financial future. When you open a Chime checking account, you're one step closer to a better financial future with no maintenance fees, fee-free overdraft up to $200, or getting paid up to 2 days early with direct deposit. Making progress has never been easier. I think we've all been in that position where we've had an overdraft. Well, with Chime, you can overdraft up to $200 with no fees. That's amazing. And they have over 50,000 fee-free ATMs. Make progress towards a better financial future with Chime. Open your account in 2 minutes at chime.com/TCAT. That's chime.com/TCATT. Chime feels like progress. Banking services and debit card provided by the Bancorp Bank N.A. or Stride Bank N.A., members FDIC. Spot me eligibility requirements and overdraft limits apply. Fees apply at out-of-network ATMs. MyPay eligibility requirements apply. Credit limits range from $20 to $500. $2 fee applies to get funds instantly. Crime checking account required. Go to chime.com/disclosures for details. So Keys had these murder kits, we'll call them. He was hiding them a year or two in advance. He was planning where he was going to commit murders. There was just no planning of who it would be. So how methodical is that?
Well, sure, because even if the police try to track down murder weapons, it would never line up correctly because he got them a year or two in advance.
Right. He's not going to the local gun store and buying a handgun the day before he's getting ready to commit a murder. He's brought from some other city or wherever he got this gun and everything that's part of this kit. He's brought it with him a year or two in advance. He's gone out to the woods. He's buried it. And he's marked the spot because up to 2 years later, he's going to come back when he's ready to commit a murder in that area. And it was said that he had 5, 6, 7, 8, I don't know how many he had of these hit kits all around the country at one time. But we know he had one or more in Alaska, New York. He also admitted to having some in Washington, Wyoming, Texas, and Arizona.
Quite a bit.
It is quite a bit. And it's a pretty diverse area, right? From Alaska down to Texas, up to New York.
Covering all the major regions.
And maybe that's what he was doing.
Yeah.
The only one he doesn't have is Ohio.
Well, he knew there was plenty of serial killers in Ohio. I mean,
already operating.
Yeah. Didn't want to cut in on their territory.
So we talked about the murder kits or the kill kits or the hit kits or whatever you want to call them. We know he would have firearms in there. He also had shovels, plastic bags, extra money, ammunition for the firearms. He even had like Drano and other chemicals that he would use to help dispose of the bodies.
That's some pretty heavy planning. You think about it.
That's what I'm saying.
What a grocery list of items that you're going to get once you land there, get your rental car, and then you go get all these items and bury them. And
Gibbs, I don't even know what I'm going to do tomorrow. This guy's got a murder planned out 2 years in advance. Now, he doesn't know who he's going to kill. He just knows, hey, I'm going to kill somebody in this general area.
yeah,
So I'm going to go out there and I'm going to lay all the groundwork and I'm going to set everything up.
wow, pretty impressive actually.
It really is. I mean,
Not trying to be, but it is impressive on how he puts it all together. And clearly, he does such a good job that he has to tell the police what he did.
yeah, because without him, they would have never found this stuff.
Yeah,
They would have never known about it. I don't think they stumbled upon one of these hit kits. He had to tell them about it.
right.
So the last thing we have to talk about or in regards to his MO before we start to get into his crimes is one of the things that he would do is he would go to very remote areas to look for victims. Again, I mean, this is a strategy, right? He's not going to Starbucks where there's surveillance cameras and all types of things that can lead to his detection. I mean, he's going to places like campgrounds,
Smart.
walking trails, boating areas. If he was targeting a house, it would probably, usually be like a rural house. And he had rules. He would make sure that a garage was attached, no detached garage. He'd make sure there was no car in the driveway. And he did have a rule. Now, I'll give him this. You can't give him much, but no children and no dogs. Now, one thing we haven't talked about is he did have a daughter. He had a girlfriend, and with this girlfriend, Keyes ended up having a daughter. And he would later say that as a father, that was the one thing he could not do is kill a child. And then his last thing, Gibbs, was that immediately after committing the murder, he would leave not just that area, the whole state, the whole region, right? He wouldn't just hide out down the street at the motel.
Yeah.
I mean, he was in his car driving another.
He got out of Dodge.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's exactly what he did.
Well, again, smart, right? The sooner you get away from the crime scene, the less chances of somebody putting you together at the crime scene.
It's common sense, really, if you think about it.
Yeah.
All of that is common sense. But what is amazing to me is that most serial killers, they don't act that way. They're too impulsive. The need is too great
Right.
for them to be able to step back and think logically.
They can't plan it out like that.
No.
This is definitely unique.
And it's one of the things that drew me to Israel Keyes was this methodical, cunning aspect that he had to him that a lot of serial killers don't.
I mean, he's even better than me traveling around with my K-bar.
Right.
He gets a K-bar, but leaves it.
Well, but you have not been caught yet. So really, technically.
Well,
So now's a good time to do, could Gibby be a suspect? What are we talking here? Let's talk about early 2000s.
Yeah.
Were you traveling in the...
I got family in Seattle,
Okay, well, we're getting ready to do Washington.
so
I got to get on the horn to Seattle FBI office
Yeah.
and have them run your prints again.
well,
I talked to him last week
that's why I sliced the tips off.
with the airplane glue.
That's right.
All kidding aside, because we're getting ready to talk about the victims. We're jumping up to July, October of 2001. The reason why it's hard to pinpoint is because Keyes himself could not remember the details. So he was very fuzzy when, after he was caught, he was trying to tell investigators some of the things he had done. He knew it was around this time that he was living in Nia Bay, Washington, that he committed his first homicide. Now, Gibbs, this is the other part that's very interesting to me or fascinating to me about Keyes, right? Because we know he's caught, and we're going to tell you how he gets caught and all that good stuff. And we know he's obviously cooperating with the investigators because he's telling them what he's done.
Right.
But he can't remember everything. And so really when it boils down to it, there's really only 3 murders that he's able to really spell out for them. And we're going to go through these, but all these other ones are the victim was never found. You know, they would have never known about it had he not told them. They would have never tied it to him for sure.
Right.
So this one we're talking about, Nia Bay, they still don't know who the victim is. So from July of 2001 to 2005, that's a 4-year span. But he knows that somewhere in there, he murdered a couple in Washington. So ultimately, he's going to admit to 4 murders in Washington. So he admitted to his first homicide. Now he's saying he killed a couple. He would not tell law enforcement if the couple was married, if they knew each other. They don't even know if this couple was from Washington or if they were just visiting there, you know, maybe on vacation.
Or camping.
Remember, Tube Sock Killer.
Tube Sock Killer.
We don't know. Or if because again, he was playing a cat and mouse game, right? He was telling them some things. He wasn't telling them everything. So law enforcement doesn't know if he, you know, took this couple from another state, transported them and killed them in Washington. They just don't have all the facts. I mean, really the only thing that he would give to law enforcement was that he buried these people somewhere near a valley and that he thinks, again, he's not sure. Now, again, let's talk about that. I think if I had killed someone, I'd probably remember every detail about it.
You would think you would, but I don't know.
I mean, that would be, but maybe if you killed so many people,
They start blending together.
maybe. So 2005 to 2006, and again, we're running through these kind of fast, but it's really because we just don't have a lot of information. You know, he says he thinks it was summer, maybe fall. He committed 2 more murders. Now, these were separate, not together. But the one thing that he knows is that in both cases, he used his boat to dispose of the victims in Crescent Lake. And this is, again, still in Washington. Sounds like a Dexter situation to me.
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
Were you thinking about Dexter?
I
Man, I
was.
love that show. The guy is smart. There's no doubt about that. He was intelligent. You know, he used anchors to weight down the bodies. And not just, we're not talking 10, 15 feet of water, 100 plus feet.
That's the way to do it.
So he was making sure that these bodies were not going to be found. Like the previous couple that he murdered, he moved the victim's car, somewhere far away to confuse people as between where the car was located and where the crime actually occurred. Right? So it seems like a subtle thing, but when you think about it, it also seems very smart because you're just putting another layer in there that somebody's got to solve. So we've talked about 4 or 5 murders in Washington. Not a single one of these victims is known. Their identities are not known. The police have no idea. And Keyes doesn't know. Right? He can't even tell them because, like we said, he never knew any of these people. So we jump up to 2007, and this is when Keyes moves to Alaska. And he actually starts his own construction business, and he's working as a contractor. And it's from Alaska that he really starts to perfect this method of using Alaska as his home base and then flying out from Alaska to these different parts of the United States. right? Like we said, he'd fly into, let's say, Chicago, he'd rent a car, and then he would drive somewhere. So this is when all of that started. And this is when he starts, burying his caches of money and weapons and, all the murder kits as well. So again, in 2007 and 2008, Keyes makes a lot of flights. They know this from records that they're able to dig up, after the fact. I mean, he flies into Seattle, then goes to Boston, back to Anchorage, but he doesn't admit to anything during this time. But the police, they know. And again, I think this is why you hear in the very beginning that his number is probably 36, because over the years they've tied all of this travel to some possible, murders. But they don't concretely probably have him on them.
No, but they feel that this is his work.
Yes. So he doesn't admit to anything up until April of 2009. So he admits to abducting a female from somewhere on the East Coast. He doesn't even know what state it is for sure. And he kidnaps this person basically and takes her through multiple states into New York. Kills this person and buries her somewhere in upstate New York. But again, we don't even know who it is. We don't know her name. We can't talk about her because he didn't know her. He couldn't tell investigators who she was.
So just some missing person right now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's some family out there that doesn't know what happened to their daughter, sister, loved one. And ultimately, they were murdered by Israel Keyes.
Right.
But they will probably never know that for sure.
No.
Now, the very next day after he kills this woman, he robs a bank in upstate New York.
Got to fund his trip, I guess.
Right. I mean, and this is a pattern. Rob, kill, fly around. He liked to use a lot of cash. And that was another way that he had to avoid detection. Now, the police know in 2010 that he made some flights to California. They know as much, he got a rental car and that he drove about 300 miles in a 3-day period. But he wouldn't confess to anything during this time period. And they haven't been able to tie him to anything. But they know that he either robbed, killed, or all of the above. So just a couple of other things to talk about Gibbs before we get into the ones that we really know a lot about. One that I thought was very interesting happened in sometime in the middle of 2011, April or May. Keyes was staking out this park in Alaska, in Anchorage. And his plan was to shoot a couple that was sitting in a parked car in the park. Now, he got interrupted when a police officer pulled into the parking lot. He admits that his next thought was to shoot the police officer. And the only reason that he didn't shoot either one or both was because a second police officer drove into the parking lot. So again, we talk about it, right? That couple, if that first police officer does not drive in, they most likely would have been killed.
Absolutely. I agree with that.
If the second police officer doesn't drive in, maybe the police officer and the couple or both, all three of them are killed.
Yeah, I agree.
It's fascinating when you have this type of serial killer who actually gives insight, is able to tell the police, here's what I was thinking. Here's what I was going to do. And the only reason I didn't do it was because of this.
Right.
My wife and I do a lot of shopping online, and we always use Rakuten. Rakuten is the smartest way to save money when you shop because you earn cash back at over 3,500 stores. We're talking fashion, beauty, electronics, home essentials, travel, dining, concert tickets, and more. Your favorite stores like Macy's, Nike, Sephora, Dyson, and Lowe's. And that's just to name a few. Pay Rakuten to send them shoppers. And Rakuten then passes on a part of that payment to its members as cashback. Cashback is deposited directly into your PayPal account, or Rakuten can send you a check. You can even maximize your savings by stacking cash back on top of other deals, like store sales and coupons. You're already shopping at your favorite stores. Why not save while you're doing it? It really is a no-brainer. Membership is free and it's easy to sign up. Get the Rakuten app now and join the 17 million members who are already saving. Cashback rates change daily. See Rakuten.com for details. That's Rakuten. Your cash back really adds up. Hey folks, see if you've ever had this problem. You're trying to eat a little healthier, but you're in the grocery store aisle, you're looking at packaging, nutrition labels, and they're so confusing, you don't know what's good for you and what's not. Well, this is why I love Thrive Market, my go-to online grocery store for getting all of my healthy essentials delivered, and I don't even have to leave my couch. Finding better options for the whole family is easy with Thrive Market's Healthy Swap Scanner. Just scan a product and it instantly recommends healthier swaps. This is how my wife and I found our new favorite snack, IQ bars. Sometimes I eat one in the morning with my coffee, sometimes just later on in between meals. They also have so many on-site filters that make it simple to shop by the needs of everyone in the family. Maybe you have someone who needs gluten-free food, somebody that has a peanut allergy. Well, no more scouring ingredient labels when you can just filter it all on Thrive Market. My wife and I often use the high protein filter to stock up on things like Sieti chips. Ready to make the switch? Go to thrivemarket.com/TCAT for 30% off your first order, plus a free $60 gift. That's THRIVE market.com/TCATT. thrivemarket.com/TCAT. All right, let's jump to June of 2011, because this is one that he admits to. We know who it is. We have a lot more information about this one. So he flies to Chicago from his home base. He rents a car and he drives over 1,000 miles all the way to Vermont. So again, I mean, he doesn't fly into New York, which is much closer to Vermont.
Right.
There's tons of big places that are much closer to Vermont.
Yeah, he could have picked so many different other locations, but
Boston.
Yeah, Philadelphia, right?
Yeah, he chooses to fly into Chicago and drive over 1,000 miles. And basically all he's doing is looking for that one perfect house. And in his own words, what he said he was looking for: a house off the beaten path. Those are the words that he used. Had to have an attached garage, no evidence of children or dogs. So that's what he's looking for. As soon as he finds that, which it didn't take him long, then he's going to put, his plan into action.
At this time, we can provide the following description of the events as we understand them leading up to and following the murders of Bill and Lorraine Currier. Israel Keyes left Alaska on June 2nd, 2012 and flew to Chicago, Illinois. When he left Alaska, he did so with a specific purpose of kidnapping and murdering someone. Keyes brought a gun and a silencer with him. Upon landing in Chicago, Keyes rented a car and drove east to Vermont. On June 7th, 2012, Keyes checked into the Handy Suites located on Susie Wilson Road in Essex Junction. In the evening hours of June 8th, 2012, Keyes left the Handy Suites and began looking for a house to break into, kidnap the residents, and murder them. Keyes was specifically looking for a house that had an attached garage, had no cars in the driveway, did not have children, and did not have a dog. Keyes was also looking for the type of home where he could accurately predict the layout of the house and easily identify where the residents would be sleeping. The residence of Bill and Lorraine Currier fit the description of the type of house Israel Keyes was looking to break into. Keyes had no prior knowledge of who the residents of this home were, nor had he ever had any prior contact with them. In preparing to break into the house, Keys cut the phone wire going into the house. He did this to see whether the residents, who we now know were Bill and Lorraine Currier, had a security system that would alert the police. The Curriers did not have a security system.
Pretty intelligent.
Oh yeah, I mean,
He didn't say he was worried about them calling 911. He cut the phone line just to make sure that they didn't have an alarm system.
just really well thought out, well planned.
Very. And scary, right?
Oh, it's definitely, yeah. I mean, this is so random. It's just, that's how cold it is.
Well, you're living in a house out in rural Vermont,
Yeah.
eating your maple syrup on your pancakes, thinking everything's great,
Making your candles.
making your candles. You're not expecting a serial killer to fly from Alaska into Chicago,
Right. And
drive, find your house because your house has the perfect layout and he can predict where where the bedrooms are. And I mean, there's just so much to it. Now, I think I said 2011. I made a mistake. It's 2012, as the gentleman said. But Keys smashes in through a window in the garage, and that's how he gets in. And he heads straight for the bedroom. In his mind, he knows he has a good idea where these people are sleeping. He's got one of those headlamps.
Yeah.
You know, those...
like a miner's
yeah.
light.
But they now they make them for all kinds of stuff. You can use them like fishing at night. And
Yeah, they're like on a little headband,
Yeah.
elastic headband. They got a little battery
so
operated
he's
light.
using that as his light. And it was said that within 6 seconds, he had both Bill and Lorraine Currier zip tied, subdued. 6 seconds.
Well, he is skilled. He's got skills. We know that from his citations, awards, whatever you want to say when he was in the military.
Well, he didn't win an award for zip tying people, but
Well, sounds like maybe he gets one.
he had skills. You're right about that. I mean, there's no other way. And I don't want it to sound like I'm glorifying this guy, but I'm trying to really project out there the scariness of this individual because he had it together. And to me, that's scary, right? He wasn't a deranged, off-the-wall character.
No, every step was calculated.
Yeah.
So
It was methodical. Everything was put together. He left no DNA behind. Keep in mind, this happened in, 2011, 2012. They have no idea what happens to Bill and Lorraine Currier until much later when they catch up to Keys.
Until he makes a statement.
So he puts them in the car and he drives them out to an old abandoned barn. He gets Bill out of the car first and Bill's fighting him. But Israel Keys is not playing around, Gibbs.
No.
As soon as they get in this barn, he takes a shovel and he smashes Bill's head in. That's not enough because then he shoots him dead. Now, as all of this is taking place, Lorraine, who's fighting for her life, she's somehow gotten free from the zip ties, which that's quite a feat because if you've ever been, depending on how thick the zip ties are,
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
those are not easy to get out of.
Yeah. Even the cheap ones are a little rough to get out of.
Right. But she's broken free and she's running towards like the highway or the main road. But he's able to catch up with her. He tackles her on the ground and gets her back to the barn. Now he sexually assaults Lorraine and he strangles her. So I guess my question, Gibbs, is why does he hit Bill with the shovel and shoot him, but strangle Lorraine? Because we know strangulation is very hands-on.
Well, just like a few of them that we've covered in the past, they like having that control and seeing the life go out. I mean, they like looking at the eyes and...
Right. It's all about control, right?
Absolutely.
Strangulation is you're ending somebody's life and you're watching it end.
Yeah.
As opposed to, shooting somebody in the head is fast.
Yeah, but it's random. I mean, it's not random, but you don't know the results. But if you got somebody's throat in your hands and you keep applying pressure, you know the result.
I wonder what the significance of that is, because he sexually assaults her and strangles her, but deals with her husband in a much different way. I just wonder if that has to do with man versus woman, wanting the power over the woman. I'm just not sure. I'm just throwing it out there. But I think it was said, Gibbs, that if he had his choice, gun is not his preferred method. So maybe it was that Bill was putting up such a fight that he didn't get a chance to use the method that he would have preferred. And maybe with Lorraine, he had enough power over her that he could do it the way he chose to do it.
Yeah, it makes sense.
That's the only thing I can think of.
Possibility.
So after he's killed both Bill and Lorraine, he puts their bodies in separate garbage bags. Now, those would have had to been pretty big garbage bags unless he dismembered them,
right?
Which I have no evidence that he did. But he leaves them in this abandoned building. And eventually, the building gets demolished. And what's crazy about this is, to this day, their remains have never been found.
That's nuts.
He's telling them what happened, but I don't know if he knows exactly where it was or what building it was. You would think they'd be able to figure it out.
He must just be getting them in the ballpark, but not enough to take him to the right seat.
But the one thing he is able to tell them is that he dumped the gun in a lake, and the cops are ultimately able to find that. So they can find the gun at the bottom of a lake, but they can't figure out what abandoned building would have been demolished within a certain... I guess the one thing we don't know is how far he drove.
Well, sure, yeah.
From their house to this building. I don't know. I just, in my head, seems like to me they should have been able to figure it out somehow.
Well, you're thinking how hard would it be to find an abandoned building and then where they found the gun. But, he could have drove hundreds of miles and dumped the gun.
You're right, because we know he did. That's one of the things he did. So after the murder, he travels around the East Coast for a while, and I think they're a little unsure. I think the thought is he maybe could have committed some more criminal activity during this time period, but he ultimately drives back to Chicago, all the way back to Chicago. He took the couriers from Vermont. He dumped the gun in a lake in New York. So I hate to step backwards, but like we said, maybe I'm being crazy talking about the fact that they should have been able to find this building because, hell, we don't even know what state the building was in.
No. That's how good it is.
Yeah. I'm totally rethinking my position on this whole thing.
Yeah.
All right. I'm calling BS on myself now.
I do that all the time.
All right. Well, you should have done it before I had to do it. All right. So getting back to Chicago, he's in Chicago. He takes a flight from Chicago to San Francisco. For some reason, he stays one night in San Francisco, all part of his devious plan, right? He's doing everything for a reason. He stays one night, and the very next day, he flies back to Anchorage. This is a hell of a round trip if you think about it.
Yeah, but it's smart. If you really think about it.
It is smart, but that's a ton of flying, driving. I'm tired just thinking about
but if you never
want
to get caught.
You're right. I can't argue with your logic there.
Maybe today it might be a little bit different with all the technology that's out there, that you're never really alone.
Yeah, but this wasn't that long ago. 5 years is...
Didn't have smartphones like you do today that ping
Bullshit.
Every tower,
I had an iPhone in 2012.
You probably had like a BlackBerry or something.
I might have had both.
Yeah, you probably did. Probably thought you were cool. Had them clipped to your belt.
You had the Nokia flip phone, probably.
I did.
No, I don't mean back when you were supposed to have it. I mean like 5 years ago. You still had it.
I probably did. Because you know what? I don't follow trends.
That's true.
I set them.
You're a trend setter.
That's right.
Like we said, there's really only 3 murders that he knows, or that law enforcement ultimately knows who they were. So we've already talked about 2 of them, Bill and Lorraine. So now we have to talk about the third victim that is known to police. Israel Keys is back in Anchorage, Alaska. And this is where, and again, you and I have talked about this on other episodes, Gibbs. Serial killers get sloppy. And at some point, they get confident, overconfident, and it ultimately leads to them making mistakes and getting caught. Now, what has Keys been doing up to this point?
I mean, he's been smart, right? Stay away from doing things around the home.
Right. He hasn't done anything in his home base of Anchorage, Alaska. He's flying all over the country, driving. But now all of a sudden, he decides to kill somebody in Anchorage, Alaska. And this is ultimately what trips him. And it's about 5:00 p.m. The sun has already set. There's a lot of snow falling. And basically what Keys is doing is he's sitting across from this little shop. And he's waiting for the shop to close at 8:00. So Keys walks up to this drive-thru. They must have sold coffee because there's one lady working and her name is Samantha Koenig and she's a barista. And a barista is somebody that makes and sells coffee, right? So before Samantha Koenig even knows what happens, Keys is inside the window. Now, he's got on a mask, a hoodie, and he's carrying a gun. There's no way she even knew what was going on. It happened so fast. And there's actually video out there of it if you want to see it, because the drive-thru or whatever it was had a closed circuit TV. So you can actually see him kind of jumping through the window and getting her. It's a little scary, freaky. But like some of the other ones we've talked about, Gibbs, he worked very quickly because before she even knew what was going on, he had her down on the ground, zip tied, and totally subdued.
If you want to limit the amount of evidence that the police can find, capture, whatever, I mean, he's smart. I mean, he's getting in there immediately. He's eliminating any type of struggle because that's where things get messed up. I mean, once the struggle happens, you can get physical evidence, scratching, things like that. So, I mean, he's smart. They subdued the victim now, right away. Waste zero time.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right, because something as little as, somebody with a fingernail scratching the face, that can leave DNA. I don't know. I assume he's conscious of all this because he's doing things in a way that makes it seem like he is. So he gets Samantha up off the ground and they leave the drive-thru. They cross this highway, and really the only thing that captures this is the security camera. And really what you can see is his hoodie. But Samantha was a fighter. And just like Lorraine had back in Vermont, Samantha at one point breaks free. But Gibbs, you have to figure Keys was in pretty good shape. He had been in the Army. I've seen pictures of him. He was trim. I don't think it was that hard for him to chase down Samantha Koenig. She didn't get away, right? He chased her down. He tackled her just like he had done to Lorraine Currier back in Vermont. But this whole thing went a lot different than the events that had unfolded in Vermont, because he puts her in a car, Samantha, and he's driving her around town, and he's telling her that he's kidnapped her for ransom. He wants to ransom her back to her family.
So he takes a barista
from a shack,
thinking this is the big meal ticket.
Right. And she immediately tells him that her family is not rich. They don't have
she's working in a
lot of money. This is where, to me, he's been so methodical. Everything's been by his book, we'll call it.
Right.
Now, all of a sudden, it's like he's completely gone off the rails.
It's like his first time he's ever done something.
Right. It's almost like this is his first crime.
Yeah.
And he's just being so
carefree,
cavalier,
yeah.
Not following his own set of guidelines and principles. But he promises Samantha that he's not going to harm her as long as she cooperates. What he does do is he takes her cell phone and he sends some text messages. He sends one to her boyfriend, and he sends another one to the owner of the coffee shop, basically acting like he's her, saying, you know, I've had a bad day, I had to leave work, and I'm leaving town. Again, that's pretty smart.
Yeah.
What he's done up to this point has been
Sloppy
and not very intelligent, but that part is. Now, the other thing he was able to do was get her ATM PIN number. Now, this next part, Gibbs, for me, is again so far removed from what he had been doing up to this point, because he actually takes Samantha back to his house in Anchorage.
Well, again, this is sloppy, man. If he took her back to his own house.
And it's not his house. It's owned by his girlfriend. Because you remember, we kind of foreshadowed it up front.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
He has a girlfriend and he has a child with this woman.
Right.
Is my understanding that she owned the house. Now, it's in a rural area. But again, you're taking a woman that you just kidnapped back to your girlfriend's, you and your girlfriend's house, let's call it, where your child is. She's 7, 8 years old, around there.
It's really sloppy.
Doesn't make any sense.
No. I mean, now you're worried about DNA transfer.
Yeah.
I mean, why would you even? Yeah. Wow.
He puts her in a shed on the property, ties her up, turns the radio up real loud to drown out, you know, her screaming, or, you know, try to make sure that nobody hears her. And then what he does, he actually drives to her house, Samantha Koenig's house, to get her ATM card. And then he drives to the ATM because he wants to test out the PIN number that she had given him. Now, Gibbs, the next thing that Keys does is, after he had gone to the ATM, he went back into the shed, he sexually assaulted Samantha, and then he strangled her. But he didn't dispose of the body. He left the body in the shed, and he went back inside his house, probably like nothing had happened, right? We've talked about this before as well. How do these people do this and then just walk in and be like, "Hi, honey, what's for dinner?"
Yeah, just shut it off.
How do you do that?
I don't know.
He goes back into the house and he starts packing because he already had a cruise planned, right? So how crazy is that? He's like, I got a cruise that I'm leaving for the next day. I better kill somebody the night before.
Yeah. And I'll just leave her in my shed till I get back to deal with it.
And that's exactly what he does. He flies to New Orleans because that's where the cruise is leaving from. He goes on this cruise and then he comes back. And this is where it just starts to get, like, you could not make some of these details up, because what he does, now keep in mind, he still has her cell phone, and he texts her family and says, go to this local dog park, and when you get there, you're going to find a ransom note. So the family goes out and they find this note. And on one side, there's a picture of Samantha that Israel Keys had taken, and she's holding a recent newspaper, right? So this is like proof of life type stuff.
Yeah.
You know, I'm showing you she's alive. Here's the date.
Yeah, here's today's paper.
And on the other side, he had typed out a note demanding $30,000, and he wanted it deposited into Samantha's account. Because remember, he has her ATM card with the PIN. So her family complies, and they deposit the $30,000 into her account. Now, the cops are all over this by now. They've drawn the cops in. And it was said that in all of Anchorage, Alaska, there were 380 cops at the time. And every single one of them was working on this case. They also had the FBI was in. I think they were all looking at this as a good thing. Samantha's alive. The person has reached out to us. and to your point, how's he going to get this money out, Gibbs? They were thinking, okay, as soon as he starts taking it out, they're going to know where he is.
Yeah.
He's going to start leaving.
There's going to be a trail.
Yeah, digital trail. And he does. Less than, a couple weeks after they probably put the money in, Samantha's card pinged from a bank in Arizona. So I think this was his plan. Get the money in there. I'm going to get out of Alaska and I'm going to travel the country, and they're not going to be able to catch up to me. The flaw that I see is, I guess it's not a flaw, because I was thinking you would want to shut it down, but you wouldn't want to shut it down. You'd want him to keep withdrawing the money.
Yeah, that's the only chance you're going to have to get him.
So I wonder if he thought that through. Was he that smart?
I would have thought he would have been, but I'm kind of doubting.
I think he was. I wasn't that smart because I didn't think about it. I mean, I did, but it took me a little bit.
Well,
Go ahead and say it.
You're slow like that.
So as soon as this card pings, right, everybody's jumping into action. And they call the FBI in Wilcox, Arizona. That's where this bank is. It's the middle of the night, and the FBI agent has to jump out of bed and try to get to this location. He gets there, and he finds nothing, right? So this is March 8th. The very next day, on March 9th, the card pings again. And this time it's in New Mexico. Now, they were able to get the surveillance video from both of these ATMs, but really all they could see was a man. And what it appeared was that he had on a bunch of layers of clothing, was trying to make himself look a lot heavier than what he really was.
So he's trying to be smart.
Yeah, he's trying to be smart, but he's got a full face mask on and glasses. So they're not able to really see him. But what they were able to see was the same vehicle at both locations. So all they know, the FBI knows at this point, they're looking for a man of average height, and they know what he's driving, and that is a 2012 Ford Focus. The other thing they know is that he's headed east, right? Because he's gone from Arizona to New Mexico, basically on the I-10 corridor. So you have to figure, Gibbs, at this point, they got alerts out all over south, southwest, however far east they went, Bolo for this 2012 white Ford Focus. And it's on March 13th that actually up in Anchorage, they get a call because a police officer spots a 2012 Ford Focus in the parking lot of a hotel in Texas. So they bring in some undercover agents, and they're basically sitting on the car, right? They're waiting for the driver to come out. And he does. He comes out of the hotel. White male, 30s, average height, average build. So the police were ordered to tail the car, which they did. And they ultimately pulled the car over. And they asked the man for his driver's license, which he produces. And it says Israel Keys. Alaskan driver's license. But the big thing they find is they find Samantha Koenig's ATM card. They find her cell phone. They also find the mask, a gun, and a dye pack. And the dye pack came from a bank that Keys had robbed in Texas just a few weeks ago. All they know at this point is that they found the man that they're looking for as it relates to Samantha Koenig. But they don't find Samantha Koenig. So the FBI comes in and they start questioning Keys. And he doesn't tell them anything. I think his exact quote is, "There's nothing I can do to help you." But obviously they don't give up, right? They're on him day in, day out. He ultimately confesses to the abduction of Samantha Koenig around the end of March 2012, like March 30th, beginning of April. At this point, they've got him back in Alaska. Now, the other thing that they did when they got back to Alaska is they searched his house. And one of the things that they found in his house was his computer. And on that computer, he had a bunch of news footage of the Samantha Koenig disappearance and the ongoing search. So once he's presented with the evidence and everything they have against him, like we said, he does confess, and he basically says he took Samantha, threw her in his truck, put her in the shed near his driveway, sexually assaulted her, and strangled her that very night. So he killed her that night. Then he goes on to say he left her body in the shed while he took the cruise. But this is where it gets freaky, because he tells police that when he gets back from the cruise, that's when he took that picture of Samantha holding the current newspaper. This is like 2 weeks after she's been dead.
Wonder how he did that. Preserve the body.
Yeah, I don't know, but however he did it, it was enough to fool the FBI, because everybody involved thought she was alive. He goes on to say that he had dumped her body in a lake after he had taken the picture. So then that's, after that point, that's when he went on to do the whole extortion, ransom thing. That's when he took off. But just think about that. He killed her. He took a Caribbean cruise. He came back.
Pretty cold.
Took a picture of her.
Yeah.
To prove to the family and the FBI that she's alive.
Proof of life.
Enough so that they were willing to deposit $30,000. I'm blown away by that part. Now, the other thing they found on the computer was a whole bunch of coverage on the Courier case. That's how they put him on that. See, they would have never known that at all had it not been for the
data on the
computer. And, they're drilling him with that. It took him a couple weeks to confess to that one, but he ultimately does. So one of the things that Keyes told the FBI and the investigators as they were grilling him was that he was two different people.
They know they're going to tell you something that does not line up with anything I tell you, because I'm two different people, basically. And the only person who knows about what I'm telling you, the kind of things I'm telling you, is me.
How long have you been two different people?
Long time. 14 years.
That's a little chilly.
Yeah.
A little chilly laugh.
A little freaky.
So he's telling them, I've been doing this stuff for a very long time. Now, I'm only going to tell you about a little bit about it. I mean, that's what I think, Gibbs. I'm going to tell you some of it, but if you have to figure, if he's been doing this for 14 years, what is the body count?
Yeah, I mean, I even think he's still playing, he's still playing the game.
Yeah. Why tell him everything? He's indicted. They've got a bunch of evidence against him for 3 murders. One thing we've talked about it, but his girlfriend and his daughter come into play here because he had a lot of concern for them. He didn't want them to look bad. You've got this guy who is willing to do all of this stuff, kill people, with really little regard for any human life. But then he has all of this regard for the people, his own family.
But in most cases, I mean, he was able to shut it off for quite a while.
Well, and I think that is one of the things that a lot of serial killers are able to do, right? You talk about compartmentalizing, right? I've got this life over here, and then I've got this urge, and I've got these things that I have to do, and I can keep them totally separate.
I don't know if you can say you're two different people. I just think you can say that you're good at separating the two.
Yeah, I don't think you're two different people. And I think there's a lot of sociologists and criminologists that would say that serial killers, in a lot of respects, in that respect, they're no different than a lot of us, right? We're all able to compartmentalize certain things.
Right.
The difference is I'm not compartmentalizing going out and killing people versus coming home and having a chicken dinner with my family. So one of the things that Keyes said is that he was afraid that when his daughter was old enough that she was going to Google his name and find out exactly what he did. And this gave all the leverage to the prosecutors. Basically, they could say at this point, okay, tell us everything you've done and we'll try to keep the publicity down. But it was after he was convinced that his family would be protected. This is when he would come out and tell some of the other things that police had no idea that he had done. Again, he didn't know all the details, but it's some of the stuff that we covered in the very beginning.
Right. And then we go do a podcast on him.
Now, I do want to read this about this guy named Frank Russo. He was the assistant U.S. attorney that was working on the case. This is probably a guy that has seen a ton of killers, a ton of serial killers. He would come out, and he was known as an expert on serial killers, but he would come out and say that Israel Keyes was one of the top 3 organizational minds he'd ever come across.
It's saying a lot.
It really is.
Especially based off the other expert comment that we had on the soundbite earlier.
Right. I mean, these are experts saying this guy is among the most calculating, the most methodical serial killers they've ever come across. I mean, that it really is saying something.
Yeah, that's scary.
You know, Keyes would as he opened up to them, he would tell them about his rules, some of the ones we've already covered. No children, because he was a father. He tried to only use cash. He took his battery out of his cell phone whenever he was what he called on the hunt, which is obviously a good idea. But there again, like we talked about, when you get to the Samantha Koenig case, he basically broke every rule that he had set for himself. Why? Was it because he couldn't control the urge? He didn't have time to do his elaborate plan and fly somewhere and then drive? Was the urge just so strong at that point in time that he felt like he had to break all of his rules and commit murder in what is essentially his backyard?
Right.
So one interesting thing, Gibbs, I think that police come out and say is Israel Keyes was not crazy. He didn't kidnap and kill people because he had, for lack of a better term, some wires loose. Or he didn't have, like Son of Sam, some dog telling him to do something. We didn't get to it in the beginning like we usually do. He really didn't have what we would call bad childhood compared to most of the other serial killers that we've done.
No, he just kind of had like a strict religious background.
Right, but he wasn't abused or beaten that we know of.
That we know of.
He did all of this because he liked it. He got enjoyment out of it. Yeah, almost like an addict, right, that enjoys their drug of choice. He loved killing people. I can't emphasize that enough. That is scary to me, that a guy is driving around, flying around, randomly killing people because he likes it. All right, Gibbs. So Israel Keyes sitting in jail, since they got him in 2012, March. They had him on kidnapping, murder, and it's on December 2nd of 2012 that they find Keyes dead in his cell. He'd cut his wrist and he'd hung himself by rolling up his bed sheets. Now, under his body, they find this blood-soaked 4-page letter, and it had so much blood on it that investigators couldn't even read what it said. That's how much blood they say was on this notepad. So they had to send it to the FBI lab at Quantico to have it enhanced. So he had written a bunch of stuff on there, and one of it was like almost like a limerick or a rhyme. And they were trying to say, does this mean something? Is it leading us down a path of, other murders? Or they basically come to the conclusion that there's no hidden code, there's no message in any of it. And one of the parts, it says, you may have been free, you loved living your life. Fate had its own scheme, crushed like a bug, you still die. Family and friends will shed a few tears, pretend it's off to heaven you go. But the reality is you were just bones and meat, and with your brain died also your soul. The guy's a poet, and he didn't even know it.
That's right.
One thing that this does is it kind of sets him apart from a lot of other serial killers, because when he committed suicide, it meant that he would never be convicted. So he's a confessed serial killer, but not a convicted murderer. The other thing it does is it forces them to drop the charges because they have nobody to convict. I mean, how strange is that?
It's definitely strange.
They know he did it, but the law requires that they dismiss the charges because the guy's dead. You can't charge a dead guy, I guess.
He can't defend himself.
That's true.
Really, this is a remarkable sort of a pathway that he's left for investigators. He's a textbook psychopath, really. This guy clearly is in a league of his own in terms of what was motivating him and how he was actually able to pull off, a decade of cross-country homicides, abductions, bank robberies, and other assorted felonies that really left a trail of misery in his wake. He was very specific about some of the details he gave and very vague about others, leading me to believe that he was certainly holding a lot of cards up against his chest at the time he died. One of the tragedies that go along with a case like this and a guy like this is that he takes to the grave many of the things that they would love to know. And in a way, it's the ultimate act of cruelty.
It's interesting what he says, because if you think about it, Samantha Koenig's family, even though they know who did it, they never actually got to see justice. They could think of it as justice that he's gone, but they never saw him convicted in a court of law. To kind of wrap this all up, Gibbs, I want to talk about a couple of possible additional homicides. What the FBI does is they end up releasing a list of 35 different trips that they knew that Keyes had made across the country, spanning from 2004 to 2012. And what they were hoping is that either the public or different local law enforcement agencies would be able to match some of their unsolved cases up with this timeline. Now, in addition to that, Keyes did provide some details about an abduction and the murder of a female, but really all he said was that this is that she had really pale skin. He thought it was possibly like a wealthy grandmother. She was older, and she was driving an older car. So, I mean, he's confessing to things, but with no detail, no context.
Because he was smart about what he did. He didn't keep a scrapbook.
Sure.
Mementos, things like that. Some of them, would have.
That's a good point, too, because if he'd kept trophies, like a lot of serial killers do, they would have had other stuff. The only thing he kept was that computer data that did tie him to a couple of them.
Right.
But in addition to those 35 trips that we talked about with the FBI, and I think we mentioned this early on, he did some international travel. And it's thought, again, why his number could be much higher, because they know he was in British Columbia in 2005. He was in Belize in 2005. He was in Canada in 2007. He made multiple trips to Mexico Are we thinking that he just went there and didn't kill anybody?
I mean, we're never going to know, but
Why wouldn't he?
why wouldn't he? Yeah.
He enjoys it so much. I think the one thing that we know for sure is that we'll never know what the true total number is of Israel Keyes victims.
No.
I think that's the one thing we can say.
Yeah.
We know that he killed 3 people for sure. He confessed to, I think, 8 more, bringing the total to 11. You know, you heard Jim Clemente talk about they think they've tied him to 36. I think it's way more.
You could speculate all the way up to 50 or greater.
Oh, yeah. I think it could be a lot more. That's the story of Israel Keyes. Very intelligent serial killer, methodical, random, scary guy.
Very.
All right. So for Mike
And Gibby.
Stay safe and keep your own time ticking.
At the turn of the 20th century, rapid industrialization, urbanization, and political corruption were ravaging America. But soon, President Theodore Roosevelt and a diverse group of reformers known as progressives would fight back. Hi, I'm Lindsey Graham, the host of Wondery's podcast, American History Tellers. We take you to the events, times, and people that shaped America and Americans, our values, our struggles, and our dreams. In our latest series, we explore the Progressive Era, which came to be defined by Teddy Roosevelt and others who believed in a strong, active government that worked on behalf of all Americans rather than the privileged few. As the United States entered the 20th century, these progressives hoped to steer the nation in a bold new direction, to launch an era of reform to restore power to the people. Follow American History Tellers on the Wondery app or wherever you get your podcasts. Experience all episodes ad-free and be the first to binge the newest season only on Wondery Plus. Join Wondery Plus in the Wondery app, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify. Start your free trial today.